So you got traded to New York. What was that like?
So what about you when you were up there in the big sky?
Yeah.
And you get drafted by the Mets. What was your feeling?
Something that I wanted to ask is, how was the media when you were in New York, and how is it different than now?
It's pretty much the same with what you deal with today. We had that much media.
Yep.
There's more other things, social media.
Did you guys show up at the same time around that we do, or
You guys show up a lot earlier.
Okay.
That's just I couldn't get to the ballpark or a 7 o'clock game.
Yeah.
I'd be here at noon. No, we played 7:30 games back then.
Okay.
So at home, and then Friday nights we had 8 o'clock starts.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
But we played 2.5 hour games too, like what you're doing now.
Yes.
So they got over quicker.
Gotcha.
This is more like what when we played as far as the length of the games, which we love. The pace of the game I love.
I think it's
How
better.
about you?
I think it's better. I think it's better the way it is now. The pitch clock has helped get that 30 minutes to 40 minutes off of your cleats every day. And for me, that usually saves 162 hours off your cleats.
When I played, I hated being on the road on the third base dugout.
Oh yeah, because you had to run across the
Candlestick
field.
Park had big foul territories, the long trot,
Yes.
two position, and after the 3 outs,
Yep.
back, and I'd always go, well, look at my outfit.
Yeah.
Even though you're trotting in, it's energy expended.
Yeah, 100%.
And I used to hate when I had to lead off an inning.
Oh yeah.
But
You're
you
a
got
little
to
bit
get
rushed.
in and get your work. You got to
Yes.
get it going on.
Yes.
Drop your glove, get your helmet, get
Yep.
your bat, get in the on deck circle, and get ready for that person at bat. When you're hitting, do you pay attention to the clock? If a pitcher's slow and it's getting right, and let's say it's like 3 seconds and he hasn't gone into his windup.
Yeah. You are paying attention to it, but I'm really at that point. Like if the umpire calls it, that's fine. But
Right.
I'm just trying to focus on
Right.
like being ready for that pitch. So it is a little bit different in the fact that I never had to play baseball and worry about a clock before. And then now it's like I'm always like kind of checking that clock to see. I'm like, it's like always in the corner of your eye. But I do like the effect that it's had of making the games not 3.5 hours and keeping it more in that 2:30 to 2:40 range.
What is your schedule, pre-game schedule?
Yeah, so my schedule is probably a little bit more like what you probably did, and that's only come through trial and error. I show up for a home game around like 3 o'clock to 3:30, and I don't really take batting practice because I don't get a lot of use out of it. So the ball coming 50 miles an hour into me, it just doesn't do me a lot of good. I go get the machine.
You hit off the machine.
Yep, and I get that thing about as hard as it will go, and we also have the ability now to mimic ride on balls, and we mimic sinkers. So depending on who we're facing today, I will try and go and get whatever his metrics are on his pitches, mainly his fastball and maybe an off-speed pitch or two. And I'll try and go and get in on that and make it as realistic as possible.
Now, I noticed one great improvement in your offense. When you came up, you took a lot of pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always say, okay, you'd come up, and that was great because we were always hitting leadoff.
Yep.
But when an RBI situation came, you still treated it, when you were young, as if you were leading off an inning. And I'm saying, Brandon's taking a fastball down the pipe, but the men are on base.
You're right. So my more normal, and like I would say the approach that I normally revert back to is a more patient approach. As I've matured and as I've become a little more advanced in my approach and also understood my swing a little bit better, I've learned that in those situations, you're not necessarily wanting to let them get to their pitch.
Correct.
Right? So with 2 strikes, especially if it's 0-2 or 1-2, they still have 2 pitches that they can play with that can be their pitch, that they can make that perfect pitch to make you chase and get out. So really early on, they're trying to get ahead and get to their pitch. And so what I learned is that in those first 3 pitches, you're usually going to get something at that point.
Your improvement against left-handers.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
Tell me that. Well, how do you work through that?
We have a left-handed BP guy named Rafi. I started to have him try and get me out, and I would have 10 at-bats against him like every day that I would say, okay, here's the situation, and this is, I want you to get me out. I want you.
So he was throwing hard.
Yes. So he's throwing hard, and I've got him from a shorter distance, depending on who we're facing and what we're doing and the situation that we've got. But I will have him pitch to me. Keith, so we're both not from New York.
Right.
Okay, and
we're both West Coasters.
Yeah, exactly. And so you got traded to New York. What was that like?
Well, they were a perennial last place team when I got traded. I went from being 1 game in first place to like 18 games in last place.
Oh.
I didn't like getting traded to New York.
Yeah.
It's unsettling when you get traded mid-season.
Yeah.
You know, I was married at the time. I had 2 kids.
Yep.
And they stayed in St. Louis. It was a tough year for me.
I bet.
So what about you when you were up there in the big sky?
Yeah.
And you get drafted by the Mets. What was your feeling?
Well, my feeling was elation when I did get drafted by them. Obviously, the start of a dream. Obviously, you've accomplished one thing, but now there's a much bigger thing that you're trying to accomplish, and not only just that, but you're hoping that it culminates in, you know, the greatest city in the world. You know, you're trying to imagine what, you know, the big lights of New York City is actually going to be like for a guy that, you know, grew up in a town of 60,000 and out in Wyoming where there's only 500,000 people in the whole state. I would say my first big culture shock came when I was playing for Brooklyn. Just remember, you know, like staying in the Holiday Inn, because we couldn't afford housing, you know, in the minor leagues, and so they would put us up at the hotel. And there's bars on the windows and bars on the doors. And, you know, our beds are like, I'm not kidding you, like 4 inches apart. And then, you know, just it being concrete everywhere. And it's hot, it's smelly. And I was just like, man, where am I? And then you pile into this 12-passenger van with 15 people to go to the ballpark. And it was such an interesting experience. I even remember after games thinking like, where's the Olive Garden? Where's the Texas Roadhouse? You know, where are these chain restaurants? And little did I know, like I had amazing food right out the door, but it was just having to get out of my shell and like expand my horizons. So Keith, so in 1983, you faced the decision of staying with the Mets or going in free agency.
Right.
And so how close were you to leaving, and how did that process all unfold?
That's an interesting story because I had an option year left. 84, I would have played out my option.
Okay.
So 85, I would have been a free agent.
Okay.
Frank Cashin, the general manager, came to me and said, look, we've got all these guys down, and we didn't squander our number 1 picks.
Yeah.
We got all this talent, which they did.
Yeah.
And how am I supposed to know?
Yep.
And I'm going, yeah, right, Frank, sure. And Frank said, please, we're going to go into the winter meetings in November, late November. I got to know if you're going to stay or go. If you don't want to stay, I totally understand. I'm telling you, we got a foundation for the future. But if you go, I want to be able to trade you.
Yeah.
I can get a lot for you.
Yeah.
So that was fair enough.
Yeah.
So I called my dad and told my dad, and then my dad said, well, you know, they got some of these kids down there. I think that they're going to turn the corner.
Yeah.
And I think it's perfect for you. I was 29 then.
Okay.
I was in my prime.
Yeah.
So I would probably have left. I remember saying, you know, every time I got a big decision in my life, I always make the wrong choice. And my dad always seems to be right.
Okay.
So I said, I'm going to go with my dad. And I called Frank, and I got off the phone the next morning and said, Frank, I'm going to stay. Then we started negotiating. You had Scott Boras as your agent. He's a great friend of mine.
Yes.
You were in a similar situation.
Yes.
Tell us about your thought process.
Yeah. You know, I had the opportunity to go and kind of explore some of those other teams because I hadn't played with another team. Like, so you had been with another team, and you knew that different organizations kind of run it a little bit differently, and what things were similar that you could probably expect and what things were different. I didn't really know. I'd only heard from other guys. Scott would prepare, you know, a whole binder full of what their prospects were, how the attendance was, how they spent their money, how, you know, the team was projected for the next 5 years. Right. So we tried to take all of that information into account in every meeting that we held. And, you know, ultimately the Mets were very, very quiet through this whole process until right after the winter meetings. And I got back literally that day, about 2 o'clock from the West Coast. Then we got a call at about 6 o'clock that night. And it was the Mets, and they wanted to talk about negotiating and bringing me back. And they said, you're our top priority right now, and so we want to get this done. All of that time led up to, and like not hearing stuff for a few months and all that. And all of it led up to like 4 hours of us negotiating and then getting to the end of it and being like, okay, both sides are happy. Let's do this.
It happened that quick.
And it happened that quick.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, it was pretty unbelievable.
First year of your contract. Big money.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Serious goal.
Yeah, serious.
Did you feel pressure the first year? I've got to live up to this contract.
100%. I think you're not human if you don't feel that a little bit.
Oh, I've got some players that get lazy.
Yeah. You want the owner, you want the fan base to feel like they got their money's worth on you.
So it's ongoing with you.
Yeah, 100%.
You're going to play out your contract.
Yeah, it never stops. But that was one thing that I think that they recognized in me as well, was that if we put this money into this guy, he's not the kind that's going to just like, okay, I got my money and I'm going to, I always want to hold myself to a high standard and then even find something that I can be a little bit better at and keep building on that. And I think from the inside, they were able to see that. And they were able to see me work on those things and how I go about my business every day. And I think they felt pretty confident about, okay, he's not just going to get the money and roll over. And so I don't ever want to take for granted the commitment that they made to me. I love New York. I love this fan base, and I want to ultimately bring a World Series back to them. So Keith, in your broadcasting career, who has been the most influential person that has made an impact on your career?
In the booth?
Yeah.
Well, our late director, Bill Webb, who won like 45 Emmys, and he kind of recognized my personality in the booth as I was starting, and he said, you never want to be the class clown, but your personality is great. Keep it up. You're funny. It's just like you pick up, when you talk to players you play against about hitting.
Yes.
You pick up little things here and there.
100%.
So it's the same principle.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get used to having somebody in your ear?
Oh, no, the tough part was looking in the camera in the open.
Oh, okay.
And then everybody's going, oh, just pretend it's your girlfriend or your mom and dad.
Okay.
And it's not my mom and dad. Right. It's not my girlfriend. Yeah. It's a camera.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to feel comfortable. When you're doing an open, you can't be looking over here.
Yeah.
You got to talk to the guy sitting in the sofa.
Yeah, 100%.
And that was the hardest part. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with that. I still don't feel comfortable.
I struggle with that sometimes too. When they ask us to speak right into the camera and you're like looking at the lens. I don't know what it is about like the facial expression of somebody else, but it makes a big difference.
I was a terrible interviewer when I was a young kid coming up in the big leagues. I was self-conscious.
Yeah.
It took me a while.
Yeah.
I was insecure.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden
It's
you get
tough.
interviewed on the local news.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But anyway, one question. Pete Rose walked, sprinted the first base.
Yeah.
It was Pete all the time.
Yeah.
He did it when he was 40 years old.
Yep.
You do it. Did you pick that up from Pete, and would you ever think of just one time just trotting to first base?
So, no, I don't think I will just like walk to first base ever, unless I am just like hurting or something like that. It's my way of respecting the game. And did I get it from Pete Rose? I didn't specifically get it from Pete Rose, but I would like to think that my father and my coaches are who kind of put that in me when I was really young. And they grew up watching Pete Rose play. When I first started, in Little League and first in competitive baseball, it was ball four and you sprint as hard as you can down to first and take a turn because you might, if that ball gets away and you can get to second base, well, now we got somebody in scoring position. And so that's where it started, was just like out of the respect for the game and trying to hustle and make the most of any mistake that the other team might make. But then when I got to pro ball, it stayed with me where I kind of go into a different space when I get ready to compete at the plate. And I'm so in my own world and thinking about like, this is what I want to execute and this is what I want to do, And I'm so wrapped up in that competitive, like, I'm trying to win this at bat, that when I win it and when I walk, in my viewpoint, that I won that at bat, I'm excited to get down to first base. I have toned it down a bit since I first got into the big leagues, but I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I just like take off my stuff and just walk on down to first base. Just not my personality. It's just not it.
Well, I tell you what, they taught you to hustle, and that's the main reason why the front office here brought you back.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that.
That's work ethic.
Yeah.
Your hustle.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it just to blow smoke. I was hoping that they'd bring you back.
Well,
I was so thrilled they brought you back.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Keith.
All right, good.
And I love having these conversations with you.